Next week on Made in Manchester, Philip wants to build a fashion empire.
Do my labels, voila. Does your invoice? Trick of the trade. Look after the customer. Started, fireworks are off.
Lubna wants the force to be with her.
And I'm pleased to inform you that you've been successful.
I do feel proud of wearing it.
And Bev wants her mortgage sorted. Now!
This is an absolute emergency. I'm meant to be moving in 20 minutes' time. Unbelievable.
Made in Manchester from Tuesday, 11:15 on BBC Two.
One single girl, Gordon. One single obsession. One single currency. Was their union doomed? And who are those mysterious men in grey suits? And where does Gordon buy his suits? Wow! Find out when Ulrika gets to the bottom of the European single currency. Ulrika in Euroland, Friday 11:15 on BBC Two.
A one-off special where no one is safe, the one and only Jackie Mason, here on BBC Two in 50 minutes. He was enigmatic, sociable and a man of many talents, and unbelievably tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of his death. BBC Two now celebrates the career and life of Russell Harty.
He's marvellous, isn't he? That Russell Harty.
Oh.
Have you seen his what's it?
What, his programme?
Well, I wouldn't call it that.
No.
It's more than that. It's a potpourri, a miscellany, a sort of
rag bag of old bits I can't fit in anywhere else.
I first met Russell Harty toward the sort of beginning of my career as a talk show host. He wrote me a very nice letter about an interview I'd done with Dame Edith Evans, saying that was simply majestic, my dear. I couldn't have done it, but you did. Signed Russell Harty in green notepaper with green ink. I thought, now this is a strange fellow indeed.
Your makeup's cracking. Did you know that? Isn't that incredible?
What about the birthday party, the Elizabeth Taylor birthday party?
Yes.
How did he know her? I mean, how did you know her?
Because he married her. You see.
You, not him.
Oh, how did I know her?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, because he married. Is Michael Parkinson available?
The kind of a mutual bond that we had was that no matter what I did in television, I would always be remembered as the man who was attacked by a bloody emu. And he will always be remembered as the man who was attacked by Grace Jones and swiped with her handbag. And we both thought that was rather funny. It's not a fitting epitaph for Russell, but it's the one he's got.
Russell Harty died in June 1988. When he was laid to rest in his beloved Giggleswick on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales, famous names from the world of show business mingled with his neighbours and friends from the village. They'd come to pay their respects to a remarkable man who'd not only been a loyal friend, but had also been an inspirational schoolteacher, a gifted journalist, and a memorably idiosyncratic television performer. He was born in 1934 into a working-class family in Blackburn, Lancashire, where his father, Fred, ran a thriving greengrocery stall on the market.
I've got my ambition, I'll be the talk of the town. I'll hold my position, they can't keep a growing lad down.
He proved to be a hard-working pupil and was rewarded with a place at Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School in Blackburn.
The contradiction in Russell's life, you see, was what really was fascinating. It was this kid who came from Blackburn Market, that sort of very masculine North Country background, becoming what he was.
But it was a really good old-fashioned market where you went for lots of back chat and banter, and I think that's where his wit was honed and sharpened.
I also worked on the stall. Russell would get out of it as much as he could do because he absolutely hated it. He would be the little errand boy and he would go here and go there and fetch tea, but didn't particularly take a big part in the market trade.
I remember seeing his mother serving on the stall, and a lot of his humour came from his family, particularly his mother, who was very sharp. And there were two people waiting to be served with some bananas. And one was a very tall, posh-looking lady, and the other was a very scruffy-looking little Indian boy. And Myrtle said, "Are you two together?" Myrtle, she was called.
There were stories that Russell used to tell about his mother being asked, "Are those King Edwards? No, they're Fred Arties. Keep your hands off them." She would appear to be a somewhat coarse lady, but in fact was not. I mean, was a woman of considerable delicacy.
My mother used to be absolutely paranoid because Russell would come home from the library with 3 or 4 books, and my mother would then end up with the Dettol out washing them, saying, "We don't want you to get diphtheria because you don't know who's had those books."
Northern women, I mean, that's really, I mean, their life is slung between 3 poles of dirt, disease and the lavatory, really. The whole life revolves around things like that. And with commendable self-restraint, you're actually not saying that I was at Oxford with you. And that
How will you tell me not to mention
Yes, but I was actually on the same staircase as you were.
And we have known each other 22 or 3 years, actually, and you've done very well for yourself.
I first encountered Russell here in Oxford when we were waiting for our very first tutorial. You have to remember that in the 50s, of course, there were very few universities. Everybody wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge. So you would think that we would work hard and do our homework and write our essays and be really good, but we spent much more time having dinner parties.
Good evening, and welcome to Oxford, to Exeter College, Oxford, to room 3, staircase 3. As blank and bleak and bare a room as it was 31 years ago when I first came here as a nervous little northerner, with all the essential equipment for 3 years' study. 1 teapot, 2 matching cups and saucers, 6 vests, and an alarm clock.
We were both reading English, and we had Neville Coghill as our tutor, and he would give dinner parties for Peggy Ashcroft and all of the visiting actors who came to the New Theatre. And Russell, of course, was a social animal. I mean, he loved dinner parties, and he loved giving them, and he loved being at them, and he loved gossip.
We had this winter ball, and I asked Russell to come as my partner. And we liked each other so much, and, you know, he was tall, he was slim, he was not conventionally handsome, but he was good-looking. Dark hair, nice smile, lovely twinkly eyes. And boy, was he a good dancer. He could do reverse chassis, he could do the fishtail. And when you are confident with a partner, you can do everything too.
What do I do for the first lesson?
Tie your jacket as a leather. Okay, ready? Little bounce to your walk.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The right behind the left behind the right. Again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right behind the left behind the right. Yeah.
We had an absolute ball, and then to my fury, he dropped me for a girl called Janet Hovey, who had, in his description, beautifully sloping shoulders. I have never to this day got over it.
Now, my moment of most acute despair happened early on at the beginning of the first term. We'd all had to go to have our chests x-rayed to see who, if anybody, had tuberculosis in those days. And after all this was over, 2 people were called back. One of them wasn't me, and the other was. I decided at this point that obviously I was going to die. So what I should do, as a rather grand gesture, would be to leave all my books to this college, to Exeter College, Oxford. Unfortunately, I only had 4 books, and one of them I'd borrowed on long loan from Blackburn Public Library, so it was rather a futile gesture.
I think when he came to Oxford, his character was fully formed. He was a snob in some ways, but at the same time there was nobody less snobbish than he was. And there were various public school boys on the staircase, and I remember once Russell was mortified that I think his room was on the route that you climbed in through the window if you'd been out of college, and one knocked at the window wanting to pass through his bedroom, and Russell was in his vest, and he was very mortified that he was wearing a vest, which was public school boys didn't wear a vest.
What have you got on underneath?
No.
Vest.
No. T-shirt. Oh. I'm wearing my pants on.
Well, you are. I can't go on with this story.
He was always starstruck. So he said, "Why don't we ask Vivian Leigh to come to tea?" And I said, "Russell, Vivian Leigh isn't going to come to tea with you." And he said, "Well, she certainly isn't if we don't ask her." So he wrote to her, and she said she would love to come. And she sat down, and she said, "I'd like a pink gin." I looked at Russell, and Russell looked at me, and neither of us had the remotest idea what the pink gin was. She'd clocked, of course, what was going on. But by this time, Russell had warmed to the whole situation and was regaling her with all sorts of stories.
What he was interested in was jollity, fun. And any moment that it erupted into fun, there he was.
Rock on, Tonga. Oh, no, my bees. My worry bees, Russell. Look what you do to me. I kill you. I know you're into this. Get back before I cloud you. Get up there. There's nothing on under there.
You ought to try it, Russell. It makes you... Have a go, you love it. I don't know whether you're talking about...
Alan, Shawcross and Russell and I all failed Anglo-Saxon prelims, had to do it again. And that sort of grit, I think, entered all of us. And from that moment on, the fear of being thrown out on your neck if you didn't do your homework has haunted all of us through our professional lives.
Because you were a schoolmaster, weren't you? You were telling me you were a schoolmaster.
I was a schoolmaster for 10 years.
Well, tell me, why did you become a schoolmaster?
All my family background taught me that you had to have a job with a pension. So you see, I went to be a teacher because I knew when I was 65 that I would have a pension and I could retire and have a little cottage and 2 greyhounds.
Russell arrived as a teacher in Giggleswick when I was 14. He'd be 23. He was, of course, a northerner, Lancastrian. They had this Lancastrian burr, which a lot of shrur to it. He used to say lurries. I mean, we were amazed. Our parents paying huge fees then of £345 a year. 12,000 a year now, but for the English master to say lurries.
What we've done, we've just blown up you and me, so we can see how we all were. That's me on the right.
Well, we know it's you on the... We know it's not you on the left, don't we?
Your hair's lasted quite well, hasn't it?
Yeah. Is that the depth at which this interview is going to be conducted?
Well, I just learned from you, you see.
The school at that time had become, I think, rather set in its ways, and there was a group of junior staff who thought it was rather staid and set out to enliven it.
In fact, in many ways, of course, this was a wonderful opportunity for somebody like Russell to operate in.
We're in trouble here because we're sitting with a couple... You were a teacher, weren't you?
Yes, I've just said that.
We're sitting with a couple of teachers tonight.
School teachers do 7 or 8 live performances a day. I mean, this is a live show now we're doing. But school teachers, I don't know whether Tom agrees with this or not, they've got to get out in front of the class and actually perform.
He will always be remembered for founding the Dramatic Society. He produced the first full-length play that Giggleswick, in its long history, has ever done. It was The Merchant of Venice, and I've just got the review from the Chronicle of March 1961. It says here, if any member of the audience came prepared to make allowances for a first try, he must have left convinced that no such allowances were necessary.
I lived there for 11 years, and it was certainly the happiest period of my life. I have never been so happy. I've been maybe more fulfilled since I left Giggleswick, but I've never actually been so happy.
He had a very low boredom threshold because he'd listen to you for 10, 15 seconds, and then his eyes would glaze over and he'd move on to the next thing, or he'd say something completely different. I remember I was once talking to him, and he said, this is later in life, I'd just done an interview with him, actually, funny enough, in Yorkshire Television. And we were just talking, chatting afterwards. And he just suddenly said in the middle of it, he said, I can't decide whether to go impulse shopping in Leeds or not.
I like those potato rings that you get in Marks and Spencer's. And I was taking a big tray full, and I went to the cash counter, the checkout desk. And the girl who was serving on that machine that does that leaned over to her friend who was on the other channel and said, haha, fancy him buying food.
I was the only girl in my family. I have 6 brothers, and all my brothers went to Giggleswick. I was the only one who didn't. So I had a look round at the young masters, and I thought, Russell's great fun, but I don't know if he's really a goer. And I married Warwick. Russell was our best man.
He was great company. He was also the sort of person who enjoyed parties, dinners, very adept at inviting himself to dinner or even inviting himself for holidays on occasions.
Friendship with Russell meant that you could never do anything unforgivable. The word didn't exist.
He'd ring up and say, what are you doing tonight? Or what's for supper? And I'd say, well, I've got 3 lamb chops. So could you stretch it to 4? There's 2 of us. And so you'd go to some trouble and go out and get another lamb chop and get a meal ready and rearrange your life to have a meal a bit later for him. And then about 5:30, he'd ring up and he'd got a better offer.
It didn't ever stop the friendship. It was just a thing that was there, and as I say, there was no such thing as unforgivable. Although when I think back, some of the things were pretty unforgivable, really.
I want to know, when you said big, 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 did you mean I was big in the business or big in the body?
About 3 of both.
I was in Beyond the Fringe in the West End in 1961, and he came to see it, and we went out to afterwards for supper to quite a smart French restaurant in Cranbourne Street in London, and it was, there were various other kind of quite grand, I think Narev was there that night, and since I went to this restaurant quite a lot, they knew me, and then this was obvious. I was shown to a table and all that. And he said afterwards that it was that kind of glimpse of the high life that really started him thinking that perhaps he wasn't going to be a schoolmaster all his life.
He then moved on in 1966 into other fields and finished up, of course, in television.
I got this letter from this man signed R. Harty, and he said, I want to work for your program. And of course it was very satisfying to me, but on the other hand he had absolutely no qualifications for television whatsoever. He'd never been in television, and he was working at that time for Radio 3, for the 3rd programme, as I think it was still called in those days, doing the critics, so he couldn't have come from a kind of higher intellectual plateau. And I was rather scared of him, to be honest, because we were setting out to make a new arts programme that would be cheerful, lightweight, happy, and generally 1970s, which is why we called it Aquarius, the dawning of the new age. But at that time Russell Harty was the kind of unconventional person that I was looking for.
On the first morning that we were there, he went for a walk along the harbour outside his house, collecting fresh air and inspiration, and bits of driftwood and plaudits and greetings. He's an outside showman, and he decided to wear a pair of very gaudy socks Elvis Presley had given him. So there's been a lot of rehearsed stick dropping in order to get the socks into view.
Please, somebody fix my socks. How do you want? You want me to pull it? Yes. Only one little leg. One.
Up.
And you remember, you don't get the socks of Dali.
Those are Presley socks?
Exactly.
Good. Wait a minute. The Salvador Dali film was a 50-minute show on its own, and he won an Emmy with that. We were all frankly proud about that. But it was Russell's show, it wasn't anybody else's, and he had the chutzpah to go out and get Dali, and Dali clearly admired and enjoyed being with Russell Harty, as everybody else did.
My mustache never touched the water, you know? You know, still. And sometimes puts 2 jasmines in the water. You remember my foot?
Russ had the ability to talk to everybody. And he could be as intellectual as Mary McCarthy or as lightweight as David Niven. It didn't matter who he was talking to. He'd put them at ease and he'd be asking them cheeky questions, but doing it so charmingly that he'd get away with it. And I think that was Russell's great strength, and LWT built on that. And quite soon he was a popular show host on a Saturday night.
You're a Virgo, aren't you?
I'm sorry to say I am.
That makes 2 of us.
Are you a Virgo? Well, then you know what it's been like, don't you?
Very.
Russell was as successful as a popular entertainer, which is what chat show hosts, after all, are, simply because he actually gave the illusion of being trivial and therefore accessible, but at the same time underpinned that with a considerable knowledge of practically everything you can think of. He could always cope, as he did when Ralph Richardson started to talk about his set.
What a wonderful view you've got. What a wonderful view. I mean, you could see anything out of here, couldn't you? I mean, you could see the Tower of London, you could see Buckingham Palace, you could see the Post Office Tower, couldn't you? I bet you could. I can't see anything. I'm sure you can.
Russell was a very quirky interviewer. And he worked well with people like Ralph, who was slightly mad. I mean, Ralph was slightly mad, so was Russell, I suspect, at times. And I shall forever remember their encounter, just because they were like 2 ships passing in the night.
You don't like your own body much, do you?
No, not really. No. I don't think anybody. Shall we swap?
Bodies?
Well, you don't like your face?
I hate my face.
Do you?
I hate my body from the waist downwards.
Oh, really?
There was a press launch done for Edward and Mrs. Simpson. and they had tables at this very posh hotel in London. And when I got there, to my absolute horror, I have to say, I found myself sitting next to Russell Harty. Not because I didn't want to sit next to him, but because I knew that they'd rigged it, the publicity people. And everybody every pressman in the room, every photographer, was focused on our table. I don't know quite what they expected Russell and myself to do. And we sat there in rather awkward silence. And then Russell said to me, he said, "You know what they're looking at, don't you, love?" And I said, "Looking at me and you." I said, "They want a fist fight." He said, "Can you dance?" And I said, "Well, foxtrot." He said, "Let's go have a dance then." And we got up, and what was interesting was that we started dancing, and the press backed off. It was not what they'd expected, but also it was more than they could cope with. It was wonderful. And from that moment on, I thought, "You'll do, Russell Harty, you'll do."
You know that people expect people of your stature to come on and be funny. Now, do you find that as a weight on your
Well, not so much anymore, in a way, because it's almost quite a well-known cliche now, and it's a talent that I think most comic performers of my ilk don't have.
God had a good day when he gave you your face, didn't he? But is it your fortune or your misfortune?
My mother didn't like some of the rude remarks he came out with. She used to say, "I don't know why you're so rude, Russell. I've been watching Michael Parkinson. He doesn't come out with all the rude things that you come out with." And he said, "Do you like Michael Parkinson, Mother?" She said, "Yes, I do." He sort of said, "Well, watch Michael Parkinson then and don't watch me."
He was honest. I mean, what you saw is what you got. You know, we all have a public facade. We all have a screen that we put down. He didn't have that. And in the end, I suppose it was that vulnerability that did for him.
Later on in his time at London Weekend Television, Russell was asked to work on a programme called Saturday Night People. And Russell had always wanted to do something at the weekends and enjoyed this immensely. It's a very exciting team: Janet Street Porter, Russell Harty and Clive James.
When we rehearsed the show, it was hilarious because Clive would want the camera up, down, up, down. He was worried about whether he looked as if his hair was thinning or he had a double chin. Russell would be sitting on the other side of me, anxious about whether his upper lip looked sweaty. Russell was so ill at ease in that environment, but we both ganged up against Clive. That's what united us, so we didn't want him to steal the show. And I know when Clive was getting too verbose at one stage, I just whacked him in the elbow with a biro off camera so that I could get a word in. Russell sat a little bit too far away to do that. Somebody gave me this magazine this week. It says, "Bulger underwear will give him the degree of uplift needed for that virile, masculine look."
Have they not realised that a small brown herbicide works as well?
Well, Keith Waterhouse once told me that his local pally when he was a kid, it was a stout bottle.
You're keeping very quiet about this.
Yeah, it's a very, very touchy subject. I didn't mean that.
I was pleased with the show. Russell wasn't comfortable with it, and he announced that he was going to leave. He wanted his own show, and so he went to the BBC.
We wooed him to come and do the book programme that Melvyn Bragg had been doing before that, and Ronnie Harwood for a time, read all about it. And then once again, he sort of moved from the left wing, the highbrow spectrum, back towards the middle, and got increasingly more interested in the popular end of things.
And now you can't turn on the wireless or the TV without this little face looking at you, or his little voice sort of droning on in an inevitable way. You know you've got a big bedridden following, Russell.
What?
A big bedridden following. Statistics have proved that a lot of people spend a lot of time in bed watching your show. It's lovely watching telly in bed. I love watching Russell's show in bed because if I feel a bit drowsy, I can just nod off.
It's a good job you had your teeth in, isn't it?
The Harty shows were split between London and Manchester. I don't think it was because Russell came from that part of the world. I think it was something to do with BBC politics. But the Tuesday show came from London and the Thursday show came from Manchester and had completely different production teams.
As a producer, to have Russell as your actor and as your chat show host, it was a dream, because this man could do anything.
We were really quite competitive. But again, I'm not quite sure why the BBC decided to do it that way, but I think it was quite fresh because the Manchester, in London we tended to have more of the sort of celebrity guests, and in Manchester they did sort of zany things.
See that man in a white suit down there? Who do you think that might be waving at you?
Michael Parkinson, isn't it?
No, it's not, it's a poker closet, not Michael Parkinson. I remember in the space of about 4 weeks, we did the show from an airship over Rome, we did the show from an oil rig in the middle of the North Sea, and we did another show in the car park of the BBC in Manchester.
He's there, he's there, he's there, he's there. Is he just fit to talk? Well, many, many, many congratulations. How does it feel?
Oh, desperate.
Russell never just sat there. You know, you never came to Russell and said, that's who's in the show. He loved taking risks. That was why he used to love television, and he loved live television.
Are you proud of anything you've done?
No, find another word.
Shout out to them if you can think of a word.
Pleased.
Pleased. You pleased?
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that... That's no, yes.
Well, I mean, you can't, you can't go on with this sort of... gentleman. For too long. You're so rude to people. I'm told, anyway.
I haven't been rude to you yet.
No, you haven't yet, but I'm waiting for it, you see.
I could never get to grips with people like, say, Dirk Bogarde. I mean, I could never get close to Bogarde. Bogarde was wonderful with Harty. I mean, they did a couple of very, very good interviews together, very revealing, very fine interviews.
Since you've thrown the glove down, I'll go in at the deep end. You, everything one observes about you, your performances, your appearance, is precise, and you know exactly where you are at any one moment. Would that be an accurate assessment of you as a live human being?
Good Lord. That's what you think.
That's what I see.
Ah, yes, that's what you see. Well, yes, I suppose so. I live by order, if that's what you mean. I'm a very frightened person, and therefore I have to have a frame of order in which to exist, right?
What are you frightened of?
Letting myself down.
Russell was probably the least equipped person to do live television, in the sense that live television requires a certain amount of discipline, and Russell was the least disciplined presenter I think I've ever worked with, which was terrific because he was so spontaneous. Anything could happen.
You broadcast fairly frequently about your romantic life.
Yeah.
You talk about the girlfriend you have. Let's talk a bit about her, shall we?
I understood I wasn't going to be asked anything about that.
Well, look, if you engage to come on a programme of this sort...
What does that say, mate?
T-R-S-A.
Teresa, that's what that says. I don't re-ink that every morning for nothing, you know.
Is that Teresa?
Teresa Kelly, yes.
Precisely. I called a number in Redditch to talk to Teresa Kelly.
Yeah.
She claims she's never heard of Kevin Turvey.
Ah.
Ah.
Yeah, well...
Well...
One of the earliest shows was the famous Grace Jones incident, where I'm not quite sure what Grace Jones was on, but she was scarcely on the programme, if you know what I mean.
I'm overestimated.
By the world at large, or by your public?
That's just a lyric from a song.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. I thought there was some sort of judgment you were making.
No.
But have you calmed yourself down in clothes over the years?
Try me.
Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
No, your accent is a bit foreign.
I think, actually, if I'm honest, the Grace Jones incident was all my fault. I'd never produced a talk show before, a chat show. And there are certain rules about chat shows, like you always have the host sitting like here, and then you have all the guests down one side on a sofa. And you sort of add to each guest as each one is introduced. With Grace Jones, I decided to throw the whole thing out, and I put Grace Jones on this side and the other guests on that side. The result was when Russell finished talking to her, he then had to turn his back on her to face the others. This led to unfortunate repercussions.
Are you wearing perfume at this
No, no, I very seldom do wear
If you turn your back
No,
to me one more minute, really.
I have got to talk to
This has been going on too long already.
Well, it's only going to go on in about another 6 minutes, and you're going to have another little part of it soon.
Maybe I should go right now.
No,
then.
don't go right now unless you really want to.
Well, don't turn your back on me anymore.
I can't look at you. Now, hold on, just a moment. Just a
Move
moment.
your chair back a bit or something.
Can you listen to what he was saying?
Russell always hated the fact that the Grace Jones incident was the one which people always remembered. He was deeply embarrassed by the action she took.
He couldn't bear the press attention, the fact that there were press actually queuing outside the stage door when we came off air. On the other hand, he was perfectly well aware that it made his career and it made the success of the show.
Nice to see you again, after all this time. Conan the Destroyer. You are there, acting with a mate of mine called, what's she called, Gracie what?
You know it's Grace Jones, right?
How is she,
She's
dear
a good
old?
friend of yours, right?
She's a very good friend.
Didn't she at one point work out some stunts with you here in the show?
She told everybody she did.
When I first worked with Russell, I was the well-known one from doing Aquarius every week, and he was just a side number. He never expressed any envy at my notoriety, if that's the right word for it. When he became very well-known himself, I think he loved it.
What do you want? Well, where's your camera? Hello, can I have that? Do I have to pay for it?
No.
Is it free?
Yeah. If we would go into a restaurant, Princess Margaret would be at one table and Bruce Oldfield at another and so on. So we would have to make this kind of royal progress round, saying good evening to them. And he adored all that.
I remember being with him on one occasion when we'd gone out to dinner and we were waiting to go through into the restaurant. And a couple walked in and they were two of the stars from Emmerdale Farm. And they saw Russell and made a beeline for him straight away. And Russell responded, and there was a lot of chat and pleasantries were exchanged, and they were all very enthusiastic towards each other and chatted for 5 or 10 minutes. And then these two walked away, and Russell turned to me and he says, "Who the hell was that?" I hadn't a clue who he'd been talking to.
The first time he ever met the Queen, he said to Her Majesty, "Oh, thank God, ma'am, that you've started wearing glasses. Now we can all wear them." And there was a sort of terrible silence for the first one. She burst into laughter.
Russell adored royalty. He was the most loyal royalist I have ever met in my whole life. He wrote in his diary when he was, I think, 13, that he was completely shattered because Princess Margaret had a cold. And each day he wrote bulletins about her. Princess Diana came up at his invitation to visit 2 hospitals in Giggleswick. At the end, she said to him, "Mr. Harty, I'm flying straight back to London. I wonder if I could give you a lift." And he said, "Thank you very much indeed. I'd love that." And he walked over to me and said, "Order a car to meet her plane when we get to Heathrow, because I've got to come straight home because I wasn't going up to London anyhow." So he was invited to have a lift with her, and who would turn that down?
He was the first person I think I came across who knew instinctively that everybody was the same. That, I mean, he also knew everybody was different, but he knew that people had something in common, and that there was nothing that you could not say.
No, we don't drink. Everybody who drinks around us, they're so dull. We say, "Oh, were we that dull?"
How does this dullness affect your attitude towards women?
Oh, well, no, that doesn't... My attitude to women is steadfast, whether I was drunk or sober.
But does rice put as much lead in your pencil as alcohol?
Oh, you see, he said... Oh, yes, yes.
In the past, you have acquainted yourself with ladies who, and because you were drunk, you've forgotten who they were the next day, or you didn't remember that...
I tell you what's better about sex when you don't drink. You remember it. And there'll come to stage, Russell, when you and I will be thanks for the memory.
One of the nice things about Russell as he became famous and sort of went up in the world, he didn't discard those he'd met en route. So he had the most extraordinarily wide series of friendships from Blackburn, from Oxford, from Giggleswick, and in due course from show business. And he was liable to get all sorts of people from different backgrounds and mix them together, which was a very nice thing to do.
Your guests have arrived.
What are they doing?
They've had drinks, they're wrecking the place, playing party games. Sally forth and be bold.
Thank you very much.
I don't have a drink yet. Get one.
Have you met everybody?
We've started. No, we've started to.
The man behind you there is my local chaplain. He's called Norman.
Hello.
And that's my brother-in-law.
And that's my family. And everybody's here.
Hello,
You'll get to know everybody as the evening wears on.
He absolutely adored Yorkshire and always had friends to stay. Never came up and was on his own because he hated being on his own.
His life in Yorkshire became very, very dear to him. He loved Rose Cottage and Gittleswich, and he certainly never regretted buying it. And I think his connections with Gittleswich School were very strong, and all through his life they remained so.
He loved his garden at the house. The house had this lovely view, and round the walls you see the roofs of the houses of Gittleswich School. And then on the very horizon you see the spectacular dome of the school chapel. I mean, he loved that. So sitting out on his terrace was a most wonderful experience, especially, obviously, in the summer evening, drinking white wine, which is a most pleasant occasion. But Alan Bennett could never get over the fact that Russell had two gardeners. He's got two gardeners. Russell's got two gardeners. I can't understand it.
Russell was not practical, but he loved his home. He loved his home, but he liked to have people to do things for him.
Russell, forward please, the secret is about to be revealed. Right before your very eyes.
Well, a lot of it's on the floor.
Well, never mind about that.
Why does he make so much gravy, and what is it?
It is a haunch of venison. Imagine Robin Hood, Little John Friartuck, eating this in Sherwood.
Yes, but they wouldn't marinate it in yoghurt, would they?
You'd have to marinate it in something, because if you don't, it's as tough as old boots.
Is it?
Every time I knew I was going to see him, I just thought, oh, I've got to be really on my mettle, because you felt you had to have your wits about you, because you loved to make him laugh. And he roared laughing at other people's jokes and expected you to laugh at his, which of course we did. So it was always an exciting time, really, to look forward to. He was quite schoolmasterly sometimes. And if you made an error, a grammatical error, he certainly pulled one up. I've done it, you see, and told you about it. He would say, no, that's not quite the right word to use, you know.
When you arrived, I was describing the bit about bed and butchery, which seems to be...
Who said that?
A very eminent journalist.
You don't know who?
I know exactly whom it was.
Whom was it? Hume was it? And when did they say it?
Russell both hated and craved press attention. He was very excited by it. But at the same time, he actually, as a private individual, I suspect, deeply hated the personal intrusion.
Is there a difference, in your opinion, between valid curiosity and complete nosiness?
Well, yes, because I think the gossip columnists are a bit rotten, quite honestly.
If I tell Jean something really confidential, I know she won't use it.
Have you told her confidential
things?
things?
Yes. I've told her things that have been very confidential. I've said, Jean, you can't say this to anybody, and she never would think of doing it.
Well, now, why are you so privileged? If I told her things, they'd be in tomorrow's Daily Express.
It was in March 1987 when something happened which really wrecked Russell's world. It was a piece of journalism that must go down as one of the most despicable pieces of tabloid journalism ever written.
It was so appalling that you just despaired of the British press.
There was a photograph of a man, whoever the news thought it was. None of us knew who that person was.
I said to him, oh, I don't know why you're making such a fuss about it. Why you're making such a fuss about it, Russell? I said, nobody that I know ever reads these awful papers. And he said, yes, there is one person. And I said, who's that? And he said, my mother.
It's really ironic that a chat show host should fear being talked about. But of such stuff are we made. His homosexuality had never got in the way of his career. I mean, whatever tree he was climbing, he seemed to have got to the top of it. It never checked him or anything. What he was frightened of was not being gay. He was quite happy for anybody to know he was gay. What he was frightened of was somebody saying it.
He immediately disappeared, and where did he disappear to? He went back, of course, to his old friends. His old friends, not the showbiz glitterati, but his old friends, the masters who joined the school with him all those years ago, with whom he'd maintained his friendship. And they took him in and they looked after him and they protected him through all that scandal.
Because of the scandal, he thought he would never work again. And so when he was offered work, he took it and he did everything he was offered.
It was almost as if he had to accept every job because he wanted to keep all his options open. He was, I suppose, scared that if he concentrated on one route, it would just lead his career to a dead end.
Lovely effect of light and shade, you know, sort of morning where it makes you feel as though there may be a point in going on, there may be just a point in living. What does this mean? Hold. What is this? I think it's the wall or something. God, it's the East German border. There's a border guard up there too. God, I think maybe it's a good idea if I want to get out of here.
I don't know if work exhausted him. He did that tour of Europe, driving around Europe in a white car on the wrong side of the road for us, and I don't think he was the world's greatest driver. He had a chauffeur most of the time in Yorkshire.
What has happened?
Isn't it odd that Switzerland, the home of the Red Cross, has provided me with more physical discomfort and danger than any other place so far? And now the road barriers actually come down behind me, and right in front of me the railway lines are already throbbing.
Now, shall I get out or not? Which way is it coming?
I think he just wanted to put his all into everything, to sort of, well, I don't know how to word it, to sort of make people like him and not resent him, and I think he just worked and worked and worked till he had no more energy left.
I didn't keep close enough to him and see what was happening, and while he was very much his own man, I think he might have listened to old friends just a little bit older than him, and perhaps have slowed down, perhaps have concentrated more on work which was, as it were, dignified and noble. He shouldn't have worried about a bad press, because when he was doing what he was good at, he was superb.
It's very important that we take goodwill and peace and don't try and destroy things. And I've had a nagging feeling that on this tour that I ought at one point in my life to start bringing myself to some kind of rest.
He completed the Grand Tour with more religion than he had had before, deeper religion. He was a religious man, but he was more aware of it, and in the book he wrote about the Grand Tour, he acknowledges that he talked particularly to one nun who helped him an enormous lot, and it meant a great deal to him.
South of Munich is a lake called Chiemsee, and in the middle of the lake is an island where there's been a leaf-shrouded abbey of the Benedictines inhabited continuously for the past 12 centuries. It's perhaps the last place on God's ordained earth that you'd expect to find a joyful sister from Droylsden, Lancashire.
When I was coming out, I thought to myself, am I going to meet somebody who's in a spiritual prison?
Well, and what do you think now?
Well, from the last 2 or 3 hours spending with you, I don't think that, but I don't think that. I don't know what your perception of that is.
Well, you gather silence within yourself, and that is the sort of thing that people seek when they come to us. They know there's something there. They don't know what it is, but it's tremendously attractive to them. And I think basically that is what it is.
You can't buy that in a supermarket in Droylsden, can you?
It's a bit difficult.
It doesn't come in a bottle?
No.
Or in a packet?
And it doesn't come easily either.
When he did get ill, he was actually tired, run down, and it affected him more.
He'd just finished the book of the series of the Grand Tour, and it was the publishing party. I came down to London from Rose Cottage, and I arrived in his flat about 2 hours before the party was due to begin, and he was in bed. I said, well, what monstrosity is this? You can't be in bed. You know, Lord Snowden's coming. And he said, I really, really don't feel well.
He literally that was the beginning of the end of his life. When he was in the hospital in Leeds, the press were, I'm afraid, fairly awful.
We were told, for example, that there were press located in one of the blocks of flats across the road from the hospital. We were asked to keep the blinds drawn because attempts were made to take photographs through the window.
One of the things that people imagine is that the friends of somebody who is famous know how to deal with the press. But of course we didn't. We were completely naive. We had no idea of how to deal with them. Our friend was dying in Leeds Hospital. Physically, we could do nothing for him. I think we devoted an awful lot of our energies, some of us, I can't speak for all of us, into thwarting the press, whom we conceived as his enemy.
There was talk about cleaners or porters being approached in the pub across the road with cameras to take a photograph of him in bed, being poorly. So there was a lot of pressure put on us like that. Excuse me. Hello, intensive care sister.
It was a story, I suppose. It was a legitimate story. Russell was a very famous man. He was 52nd most famous person in the land, according to Cosmopolitan. That didn't please him at all, because the two Ronnies were joint 50th. And Terry Wogan was in the top 10. God.
I met the surgeon who looked after him, Professor Lasowski, at a do in Leeds, so I talked to him about him while he was in the intensive care, and he said, well, I've got great admiration for his qualities of character. Well, one feature of all of his friendship, about all his friends, was that none of us ever believed he had any qualities of character at all, you see. So this rather took me aback. And I thought, well, maybe he's changed. But anyway, when I went to see him, he was all wired up and in a terrible state, and he had a tracheotomy, so he couldn't speak. But you had to lip read, you see, and he was trying to tell me something, and he was saying, and I said, Sherry, what is it, Sherry? And she said, do you want me to get somebody about to Sherry? Anyway, eventually the nurse disconnected all the equipment and put a pad over his throat so you could just hear what he wanted to say. And this vital message was, Ned Sherry had supper with Princess Margaret last week, and Princess Margaret asked how I was twice. And I realised his character had not changed in the least bit.
Russell Harty, one of television's most popular personalities, has died in hospital in Leeds. Mr. Harty, who was 53, had been suffering from hepatitis and acute liver failure. His broadcasting career spanned 21 years, but it was through his chat shows that he became a household name.
It was horrendous. I mean, Russell died at 4:30 in the morning, and we were home here by, well, if I said for a rough quote, 6 o'clock, and I couldn't get in my home. There were press and cars and people with long zoom cameras round here, round the kitchen window, and I just thought it was absolutely insensitive of them. I mean, I'd just lost my brother, and I couldn't even come out of my home.
He was, I mean, to all his friends, like a close member of the family. And it was like a close member of the family dying when he died. It was as bad as that, really, extraordinary. And there was just a tremendous, it was this warmth, I think. You know, the nice security of a friend who is a real friend.
They say time is the great healer, and of course it does heal things. But there's a counterweight to that. And that is that just getting over somebody's death is a kind of disloyalty. That you should continue when somebody who meant so much to you has gone seems treacherous somehow. And time can't heal that, because it's the passing of time that causes it.
We used to sing in the choir a lot. It was very sparse eating-wise.
What kind of faith did you adhere to at this time?
That doesn't follow on from eating. You must rehearse, Russell.
You can just catch the outskirts of Rochdale.
When I got to the end of an hour and a half with Sir Ralph, of me talking very posh, he said, of all the things you've done, you've never managed to lose your northern accent.
We've been losing for 100 years. We should be getting quite good at it.
A political showdown.
This is the greatest challenge of my life.
The most scandalous TV program ever made.
I would like to congratulate you for being the first ever audience to watch Oh Jesus.
Glute, Martin. Glute. And a killer faces the music.
You've been arrested.
How far?
I'm innocent.
In the Red reaches a shocking conclusion Tuesday at 9 on BBC Two.
Good God. Alicia Silverstone is clueless.
Isn't My House classic? The columns date back to 1972. Daddy's a litigator. He gets $500 an hour to fight with people.
What's that?
A dress.
Says who?
Calvin Klein.
It looks like underwear.
You like Billie Holiday?
I love him. Old people can be so sweet.
The network premiere of Clueless.
My plastic surgeon doesn't want me doing any activity where balls fly at my nose. Well, there goes your social life.
Saturday at 9 on BBC Two.
A crucial